All right, and we are live.
Oh my gosh, we are live and in Technicolor. I can't even contain myself. Good morning, everybody in Lambda Literary Land. My name is Roger Q. Mason, and I am the moderator of this conversation, which is centering on literature that expands beyond the binary. I have with me this morning three marvelous writers. And before we do anything else, I would love for these three folks to introduce themselves to you. And then I'll go last and tell you a little bit about me. But to my writers, if you all wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, maybe sharing, if you care to, a little bit about your pronouns, and maybe a piece of work that you're working on right now that is exciting. You know, I do the plugs at the top because then if we get cut off later, we don't miss the advertisement.
Hi, my name's Lonnie. I go by he, him. I have a book out with Silver Sprocket called Putty Pygmalion. And right now I'm working on a book with Bull Gilhan Press. My pronouns are he, him. I'm excited to meet everybody.
Who do you want to pass it to?
I'll pass it to Emilia.
I saw Jennifer come off. My Jennifer, do you want to go first?
Oh, sorry.
I'm just getting ready.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm Emilia Phillips. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. My pronouns are they and them. My book, Nonbinary Bird of Paradise from University of Akron Press, is a finalist in the LGBTQ Poetry Award, and I'm currently working on a couple of projects. One is a 6-book of poems called Planned Obsolescence, and a memoir called Scar, spelled S-Q-A-R, that charts my journey from having a facial scar due to cancer all the way to gender-affirming care. So, especially in a red state like North Carolina. So thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you all.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. I use she, her pronouns. My poetry collection, I Don't Want to Be Understood, is a finalist in trans poetry. And that's from Alice James Books. I'm also currently working on some fiction. I'm feeling very precious about it, so that's all I'm going to say for now, but look out.
This is an extremely accomplished and beautiful group. I mean, I'm really honored to be in such esteemed company. My pronouns are they, them. I am primarily a playwright. And for those that follow my work, and you might know my sort of big title was Lavender Men, which was about Lincoln and his relationship with his legal assistant, Elmer Ellsworth. And I played the narrator, Taffeta, who was quite the quixotic vixen. And it was a play that we did in Los Angeles and Chicago. And then we did a short film that we called Taffeta that went all around the world, literally. And then we had a feature film that's now on Apple Plus. It's streaming on Apple Plus called Lavender Man. Well, I'm excited to say that Taffeta is coming back, y'all. And this time she is coming for the Constitution. So I have a new play that I'm writing called Bill, where Taffeta rewrites the Constitution at the gravesite of the dead America. And so that's kind of what I'm working on next. And it'll be happening, I can't say yet, but it'll be happening on the East Coast for the 250th anniversary of America this coming summer. We'll do it a couple of times on the East Coast. You know, queer writing is our superpower as the LGBTQIA plus community, because it's in that space where we really get to imagine the futures for ourselves and the legendary children to come that we all know we deserve. And, you know, before we go any further, I started out as an English major, and you know, word history and definitions are really important to me. So I would love first to start with the basics. Does that sound all right? We have this beautiful word queer, and I would love to hear from each of our writers What is that word to you? What does queer mean to you as a writer, as a citizen, as a human? Anybody can start.
I'll jump in. I have a very
Yeah.
simple and quick answer for that. This is something I've thought about a lot, and I've read so much queer theory, and there's this, you could go on and on and on and on and on. But for me, it's as simple as the fact of my queerness is my recognition of my inability and unwillingness to map myself on to structures and worlds that do not fit me.
I love that. Who wants to go next? Okay, Lonnie, yes.
Piggybacking off of what Jennifer said, I do think it's just a different way to express yourself, whether it's like marginalized gender or sexuality. I've met so many wonderful people here with different kinds of self-expression that I never even really thought to think about, as like a binary trans man. Well, I've had a lot of gender exploration in the past. I've went by many different titles and identities. But I just really think it's a way to kind of express yourself without maintaining yourself in a rigid structure.
What I find fascinating about that is it interrogates the very nature of gender as an invention. Because it says, I exist in a physical form, and I also exist in a metaphysical form. And I also exist in a sort of psychic form. And they're not all the same. And how we perceive matter is based on our socialized experience. We as material may seem to fit into a very small, don't worry, Emilia, I'm getting back to you. The pulpit has opened, child. But I love this idea that we can be limitless in how we define our self-reported identities, and that can change and evolve. It allows us to live a full life and not be bound in any way to any singular definition, especially not one that is assigned to us by matters outside of our own control. I mean, we think about assigned at birth, right? Like we come out of the womb, someone argue about what consciousness is or is not, but we come out of the womb, so far as I can remember, unable to make those decisions for ourselves. And so those are made for us. Well, what happens when we don't fit into that? I had an intersex friend many years ago who talked about the existential woe of what it meant to live as an intersex person, where on very material terms, a gender and a sexuality and a sex were defined for this person in ways that they 20, 30 years later didn't understand and couldn't cope with. And she said that has the potential to drive many a person mad, that disconnect between, in that case, who they are and who they were assigned to be. Emilia, queer, how would you define it?
Well, this has just been such a robust conversation, and I just want to say I resonate with a lot of what everybody's saying, and I'm going back to what Jennifer said about not mapping onto certain institutional structures, and I'm thinking a lot about Dr. Kim Tallbear. I don't know if you're familiar with her or if you've listened to the podcast All My Relations, but there's a great episode in which they have Dr. Tallbear on as a guest, and the episode is called Decolonizing Sex. And she quotes Dr. Angela Wiley, who is the author of Undoing Monogamy. And she says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that she sort of adapted what Willie has said. And she said, to be queer is to be against the state. And I think that sort of resonates again with what Jennifer was saying about institutions. And I really think that this is a particularly interesting moment that we're at to be defining the word queer, especially as there's so much legislation against trans bodies. And at this moment when we're attempting to identify ourselves and to reckon reckon with the ways in which our bodies are being legislated and identified for us. And there's a lot of dissonance there, and there's a lot that's, at play there. And I think this is a big moment of risk. And I also think that this is a big moment to define queer and to define that and why we need to define it and why we need to stand up and say what it is.
Building on the sentiments of Toni Morrison, I am resolute in my belief that there is no greater time for us as queer writers than now. We have never been more needed. We have never been more sought after, and we have never been more culturally necessary than in moments like this, where an erasure, a systematic erasure, is taking place in our society. Now, the funny thing about that erasure is we see the eraser. So the erasure is not really for this generation. The erasure is really for the generations to come that they're hoping will have no institutional memory of the strivings and doings of the people who came before, unless we, thinking about Susan Laurie Parks' Death of the Last Black Man, she says, write it down and hide it under a rock so they will know that we exist, unless we can sit down and lay bare to the fact that we were here. And not only leave a record of light of where we were, but also leave a survival guide for who we can be. I think about the future. I think about the future when I write all the time and the responsibility that we have to the future. And I'd love for all of us to think collectively about the future for the moment. And this can be answered in the sort of general or maybe specific to your body of work, but how can we as writers use our work to imagine non-binary and queer futures for readers who may come 10 years from now, 25 years from now, 100 years from now? How can our work be a vessel for that kind of imagining? Well, I asked the big questions today.
I went first last time, so I'm feeling like shy, but I can jump in.
Do it, Jennifer, do it.
Well, I just loved everything you were saying and agree 100% about this idea of leaving something behind for the next generation, especially for facing all of these obstacles and potential erasures. Yeah, for me, I try not to focus too hard on like envisioning or mapping out the future because I just like can't predict what's going to happen. And so when I think about writing about myself, my body, and my experiences over time as a trans woman, I think of that work as an archive. And it's like you said, it's like the writing under the stone that you lift up and, hey, like this person lived during this time and survived or didn't, or whatever happened to them happened. And I think that it's just important to record our stories in our voices and to tell our own stories instead of allowing others to tell them for us. I think that's the biggest part about what you're talking about in terms of the future and how do we leave something for the next generation to give them hope, and not just hope, but like a roadmap to being and existing. And I think it's as simple as just recording our experiences and creating beautiful art out of everything we've been through and leaving that behind.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Yeah, Lonnie.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of things that have inspired me as a trans person are accounts from the past of trans people. And I think it's very important to keep that literature cycling and not to let it be erased, and just have it out there for other people to read and be inspired and, you know, be encouraged to express themselves. A lot of my favorite artwork, like queer artwork, is just like finding people from like the 20s or like even like 1800s and what they were doing. And like we've always existed. And I think it's really important, especially now, to make sure that we're going to continue to exist through literature and media and such.
The key is through literature, because our material existence is undeniable. It's the recording of it and the honoring of it and the recognition of it. That's what we're fighting for, in from what I can see. Emilia, what say you about the future or the past or the present?
Yeah, I mean, I love this archival spirit. I love archives themselves, and often, there's so many archival silences around queer lives. And I think one of the other things that we can do also for the future of queer readers and future queer people is also to subvert narratives that have become internalized within us. This is something I attempted to do in my current book, Nonbinary Bird of Paradise, particularly in the first section called The Queerness of Eve, which reimagines an Eve who is sexually and romantically disinterested in Adam, kind of as an narrative of compulsory heterosexuality. Kind of thinking a lot about the ways in which we can be subversive of these narratives that we hold as, I guess, like hold up as like the most important narratives that shape our culture, and like what damage that does, and also what damage that does to one's sense of self when we don't see ourselves, or future queer people don't see themselves reflected in the narratives that are told most to them, or referenced most to them, or alluded to in the literature that they read. And so I think that's also the work that we have to do in literature as well.
That is absolutely brilliant. How do I invite people to write their own future by seeing who we were before fully? That's really exciting. And I want to say, I'm still haunted by this idea of fight. And I wonder if, and we'll get to this later, I wonder if there's a world in which queerness can be defined not just as in opposition to or in reference to some other system of normalization, or whatever that means, but can exist as itself, as an entity that has its own definition and its own worldview and its own space in society. That's to me one of the goals, one of my civic goals as a writer, is to build a world on the page that is so vibrant and so irrespective of the other that we don't even have to reference it at all. Because I just think about the intergenerational stress that puts us under. Because, we talk about the genetics of families and how people inherit, stresses from their families. But what we don't talk about is how we inherit the stresses from our chosen families too. How we, once we become or identify ourselves as part of a continuum of a cultural expression, now are thrust into all the beauty and also all the pain of that identity. And so I think, well, how can we make it easy? How can we find the joy and love and light in our identity so that we're not always having to identify ourselves vis-a-vis the definition of something that was exclusive of us? I don't want us to be that thing that exists because we weren't allowed to be somewhere else in the other room. I want us to be that thing because we are neon fuchsia and we are fabulous. And so I guess that brings me to the notion of rapture. And I would love to explore with you all what excites you about writing right now, either specifically the text that we are working on or the activity of writing in times that are really systemically attempting to steal joy and options away as a matter of policy. Yeah, Lonnie.
I've already gone first, so Emilia can go.
Oh no, I don't think you've gone first, have you?
You all are so diplomatic. I love it. Y'all need to jump in here. Come on. Let's create the cacophony. Boom.
Okay. Are you sure? I'll go.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I just want to say, like, right now, like, being able to write for me is just a way to also process. I think, like, journaling and writing have kind of merged for me. It's just become a way to process everything going on in the world, and a way to, keep myself sane and also keep myself creative. And I think that being creative in a time like this is one that is, it just feels so, it feels like they can't keep me completely down in a way, like I can't be held completely down if they can't take away creativity. And if I'm too depressed, if I'm too outside of community, I feel like I wouldn't be able to be creative still. And so that for me is why it's just so exciting to be making art right now, because it means I'm in community. It means that I'm able to still connect and still able to push back. So that's personal, but that's what it is for me.
But I think what you're pointing to, and these panels are inspirational and aspirational and informational for the viewership, right? Because our work is experientially learned. We learn by coming to panels and hearing people talk about how they work. And what you're talking about is what I consider to be the purest form of art, which is the story that you tell yourself to make sense of the world. And that's the story that we often lose when we take our work out into the world, and now we're trying to platform. Ooh, Jennifer is, child, come on. Inhale, exhale, honey. I know. I mean, that's the part of ourselves that we often lose or reduce in order to become part of the market. And so I think the most important thing we can do as writers is almost on a regular basis return to that self that started us on the journey and think, well, why did I do it? Why am I writing? And let me take some time outside of a results and product-oriented society. Let me take a few moments to actually recommit to me. Because if I'm not clear on why I'm doing this, then there's no way in the world I'm going to be able to, shake my boo thing on the corner and sell it to you. Because my self-belief is what's infectious. It's the fact that I know what this thing is, and you are looking for a thing to know that now we find each other. I mean, especially now, I find that social media platforming has made it so much easier for people to invest in the insular worlds of other people, and to find like-minded opportunities for communion and community because of that. I mean, the music industry is shattered by Taylor Swift re-recording her masters because the studios recognized one thing. Well, God bless. We ain't the only machine that can move people to buy shit. An artist can move people to buy things on their own. And that's a very interesting lesson for all of us. And it's hard sometimes to remember that people are watching us, that we do have people that follow our lead, and that we do have platforms, and that we are worth listening to. That gets hard in the rat race of commercialized art making. But we do. Every single one of us does. And I think about that responsibility to those audiences all the time. What are we offering them? What record of light are we giving them that they can take with them? Because that's what they'll remember. They may remember a couple of quotes from your book, but goddamn, they sure will remember how they felt when they read that chapter and they saw themselves in it. That's what they'll take. Anyway, who was next? I see both folks are pointing to Jennifer. No,
Lonnie.
pointing to Lonnie. Okay, Lonnie, yeah. Okay, yeah. What brings you joy right now?
What
Making
brings
art.
what brings me joy is I'm doing this less because I have long COVID, but I was tabling a lot and getting to meet people in person and just getting to talk to people and especially when it's like teens, when they approach me and they talk about my work and they talk about wanting to make comics, I think that's what really brings me joy and that's what encourages me, especially as like there's just like with comics you got to do it for the joy of it, because there's not a lot of money in comics, and that's fine. I just like to make them.
Wow.
And you can sustain yourself, but just like getting to hear feedback from other people and getting to meet people in person is just like incredible. And people just encouraging them to make their own work. And just getting to help other friends write their own things, and I really like making work for myself too these days. I've been making a lot of sculpture and collage comics, and I think it's important to keep that kind of stuff up.
I love how you make time stop. This isn't about the deadline. This isn't about the book tour. This is really just about saying, what do I want to do? What do I want to make? How can that grow my instrument and feed my spirit? And the other thing is that the sort of direct to audience relationship that you talk about fostering, the teens that come up to you and are able to see their future because they had a connection with you. That's beyond value for them as well as for you. That's really ultimately one of the reasons why we do this thing. Jennifer.
What's bringing me joy during this time as a writer? I really resonate with everything you were saying, Lonnie, about just like being in the world and being among people. I feel like writing for me has been such a isolatory practice for so much of my life. Like I feel like I developed my poetics just sitting in a garage, chain smoking, not being part of the world. And then I feel like in more recent years, as I had this book, as I've gone on tour, as I've had a lot of similar experiences as to what Lonnie was saying, of just like going to classrooms and talking about my work with students and watching the ways that they respond and thinking about everything that we've been talking about today about the future and what we're leaving behind for the next generations. And I feel like in some ways, I've like let go of the wheel of thinking about the craft of my writing, because I feel like I got that. I've had enough time. I went to grad school, whatever. I've read a lot. I don't need to think about that as much right now. I feel like I'm using my writing as an excuse almost to be out in the world and among people and having something to say and having a voice, because I feel like as a trans woman, I spent so much of my life not just closeted from my gender, but closeted from a sense of self. I love that we were talking about the psychic plane earlier, that was invoked, because and all those different layers of self that exist. And I feel like as a trans woman in this world, I just couldn't get those layers to align. And it was through the act of creation, through poetry specifically, which allows us to tap into different voices and forms of language. I feel like I was able to map this inner, almost psychic landscape or connection that threads between all of those layers of self. And I had this epiphany the other day. I was like, did I become a poet so that I could become a person? And I think that's it. I think without my art practice, I wouldn't feel like a person. And I'm just so grateful that poetry has allowed me a doorway into myself and into the world. And so that's what's bringing me joy lately, thinking about.
That is amazing. That is amazing, because what you're talking about is, I think, the very definition of writer. You know, when I was teaching the Lambda summer program, and we had a intergenre group. It was screen/play/writing. So you had people that were some comics, you had some, novelists, you had some poets, you had some playwrights, all interested in writing for performance. And one day we sort of defined, well, what is a writer to us? And I said, well, it's not the activity of composing language on a page. I think it's a lifestyle and a philosophy and a way of living in the world, which is that you order the world through composing narrative. That literally the way that you make sense of society is through telling yourself a story about it. And that if that's how you make meaning in the world, then that is a writerly impulse. That is a way of thinking about life that, to me, is a writer's way in. And I said to them, that is a very specific way of understanding positionality as a human. And it sets us apart from other people. Different people, a scientist may think about the statistics of something. A philosopher may think about the idea of something or the theory of something. A historian may think about whatever the modality of making sense of society might be. For us, it's telling ourselves a story. I'm going to be a little personal for a moment and say, when I was in grad school, and I went, and they were sort of looking at me because I would take extra time on tests and everything. And what they found was that I am neurodivergent, and what I have is an auditory memory disorder, which means that I'll read something, and upon reading it, they opined that each time I read something, I got about a third of it. I retained it in terms of the memory of it. So I would need to read something but 3 times, which is why I needed extra time on these tests or whatever. But the other thing that they discovered was that to fill in the blanks, what I would do is I would opine what was said. That I would tell myself a narrative version of what I thought I read that filled in the blanks of what I had read and missed. And that the narrative rewriting of it had identified patterning from the third that I read and was pretty damn accurate in its prognostication. Meaning to say that I had intuited what the hell you were going to say, even though I was a spirit in the dark, blind, moving. So on a very literal neurochemical level, the way that I understand how the hell life happens is by telling myself a story. So even on a biological level, they said if we were to do an aptitude test, you would be very well equipped as a storyteller, because that's how you survive everyday life. Literally. Not just, oh, I tell myself stories. No, I literally only understand things based on the stories that I tell myself about it. And they're pretty damn accurate. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? That what society labels as a disorder is actually my kryptonite and my gift. Well, it's not my kryptonite. That would be my weakness. It's actually my gift and my contribution to the world. And so how do we embrace our struggles? How do we embrace the challenges that we face? And that leads me to my penultimate question, because after this, I want to turn it over to our audience at home. But I would love for each of you to talk a little bit. Oh, come on, Jennifer. Ciao. By the way, your dog is so cute. They came out for a moment and then went back. I would love for each of you to not just identify and sort of gripe about, although please air your grievances because we need to hear the tea. but also let's celebrate his strengths if we can. What are some of the challenges that you all are experiencing making work right now or putting it out there? Because they banning books, child. They banning books. They burn in the libraries.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, God, so many things are against us. My first thought when you said that was money, capitalism, work.
Yeah.
I go to work. I have a day job, and I come home and I have like almost nothing left. And I'm like, when can I write? So that's a part of it too. And I think the increasing pressures that all of us are facing economically, it's just like I keep wondering when it's going to break. Like I feel like everybody I know is barely making it. And so when we talk about like being queer, especially marginalized folks, we get it extra hard when it comes to the economic stuff and the class dynamics. And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot as a working writer, and as somebody who's living month to month and just like barely getting by. It is so precarious, and to have that just suffused into the background on top of everything else you're talking about with like censorship and like actual literal suppression of queer ideas. Yeah, it's it's a lot. But I think that I try to use all of that as fuel for my art and fuel for my existence, and not just survival, but like experiencing the world and suffusing it into something beautiful.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Who else? Roses and thorns. Yeah, Emilia.
Yeah, thank you for bringing in all of that, Jennifer, especially about capitalism and the threats everyone's facing. I work in higher ed, and working in higher ed right now is also pretty scary. And especially as academic freedom is, questioned, and like what we can say in the classroom and what we can say in our research. So my poetry is considered my research. And so, several months ago, I work in the University of North Carolina system. And so several months ago, I was in a meeting with our chancellor's attorneys, and they were saying, academic freedom, you can say whatever you want in the classroom as long as it aligns with your research. So what does that mean for a poet? Well, anything you write about is your research. But, questions about like what academic freedom actually means has changed, especially as we've seen a lot of instructors, tenured professors either placed on probation, leave, or outright fired in the classroom for saying things that are part of their research, etc. I also teach women's gender and sexuality studies classes, or classes called queer poetry and poetics, that are listed across English and women's gender and sexuality studies. And so teaching in a state like North Carolina, I never know exactly like what, especially now, how some things that I could be teaching could be taken. So for me, particularly as my research is, maybe pushing against some of the quote unquote state legislatures' belief systems, I never know if that could ever raise a red flag. And even saying this out loud right now could raise a red flag. Right now I'm working as Emilia Phillips, not as a representative of the state of North Carolina. I should say that.
Well, I'm gonna say some stuff, and y'all listen, okay?
Views are mine.
Sarcasm is a lost art. Sarcasm is a lost art. And I believe fully in the ramification of language. And I also understand that the moment we're in, where every word that someone is said is scrutinized, because we are coming out of a societal moment where words were thrown and abused and used. And so I fully appreciate the robustness with which we scrutinize everything that people say. I appreciate it. But I also know that tea and shade are the building blocks of queer literature and the queer imagination. And I will say that as someone who also works in higher education, what is delivered sometimes as satire through the lens of sarcasm or parody is often read literally. And I think that that's because we don't leave space for critical thinking at the level of literature and literacy before these folks get to college. So therefore, they don't really have the full understanding of how to read a word and read a moment yet. And it's only through exposure that they get it. Now, I've spent a little time in North Carolina for various reasons. The first thing I noticed in that fair state was the barbecue. You see, I'm going to start with something cute. Very good. The second thing I noticed, and I'm not going to tell you how I know this, okay, is that certain entertainments London, I know I've got to get the kids in here in a second. So just hold on. Let me just make this point, because we're in a queer space. If you go on your phone or your computer, now you know where I'm going, Emilia. The one thing that is banned on your phone is what I will call intimacy entertainment. Now, y'all look up what that means and figure it out for yourselves. It falls under a category of something like OnlyFans. So it's for the kids that don't know what I'm talking about. When you deny people the expansiveness to explore desire, you cut off a part of their physical and metaphysical imagination as humans that makes them incapable of metabolizing sophistication of thought. You know, when we talk about grounding, you know, because I've been a yogi since I was 16, and we always talk about expanding out of the hips. Well, the hips are the core, the viscera, but also where, you know, our center of desire is. It's also our center of trauma. So when you say to somebody, I as a state disacknowledge the existence of and the pursuit of your self-knowing in that part of your body, physically and metaphysically, you stunt the growth of that person. To me, you stunt their development societally, because it's through learning who we are, what we like, what may arouse us, what might interest us, how we may relate to people. You see, looking at pornographic material, here we go, is to me an act of civic imagination at times, because it's sometimes those are people's first encounters with who they are. I mean, think about that one photo that we saw as kids. I mean, where we said, wait a minute, that's me, you know, and it's through those moments that we discover who we are. So I'm saying all of this to say that the information that we censor from people, whether it's intimacy or political information or social information, cuts off a part of their brain that they then only have to fight to regain later through many years of traumatic self-exploration and, unfortunately, exploitation. And so I think we have to give people the fullness of the human experience, guide them so that they make good choices around it, you know, but give them the option of living in fullness and being able to choose for themselves how they want to self-define and self-express. I think we've got about 4 minutes left, unfortunately. Sorry, mother got on the pulpit. And I would love to maybe take about 3 questions from our audience. Now, London knows I can't do none of this tech. So my dear, do you mind putting in the session chat any questions that people might have? Let's take 3 of them. So audience, assemble your queries, send them to whatever this thing is, and then London will filter them to us so we can see them in the chat, which is on the right side. And we can't wait for your questions. We're very excited about them. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I'll ask my last question of you all, which is, what advice would you give to young people who are trying to pursue literary arts as queer folks? Yeah. Okay, Lonnie, you're muted. Yeah, no problem, no problem. Someone go before you troubleshoot. Okay, Jennifer, how about you?
So advice to young people who are pursuing writing as queer folks. Okay.
Right.
Wow, that's I mean, I could go on and on and on. I work with a lot of young people, young queer people in my job, and I think, you know, often the answer is going to be specific to whatever their situation is. But at the end of the day, and this is going to sound cheesy, but it's really as simple as just like, do not give up your voice, hold on to your voice, discover your voice. Spend time with yourself, learn who you are, what you're interested in, what you care about. Don't let other people define your voice or yourself for you. And whatever you are, pursue that as hard as you can through your writing and through your living.
Power. Let's go to Emilia, because I know, Lonnie, you're still working on it.
Oh, I got it figured out, I think.
You got it? Okay, cool.
My advice would be to pace yourself and definitely take time to rest and care for your health and have hobbies. And, you know, like this past year, I was working a lot just to, because I was very proud of being an artist and making my income on that. But then I got sick. So you need to really take care of your body, because without taking care of your body, you know, you can't make work at as much as you like. So definitely just take care of yourself and pace yourself, and don't compare your output to others, because that's not what it's about. It's about enjoying yourself and enjoying art and connecting with people.
That's real. Emilia.
I'll answer this super quickly because London posted a question.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, I would just say that so many of the kind of traditional writing advice that's passed out in writing workshops, especially at the undergraduate level, sometimes does not really help a lot of queer writers. And I think that there are many queer writers that I would offer another queer writing students, and that's why I've created a whole class about it. And I would really offer them the idea that there are many traditions in poetry, not just one single tradition in poetry, and to find the writers that they really want to read. And then, yeah, so I guess we can go to the other question too.
So we did have one question that came through that I'm seeing. How can queer and specifically trans literature continue to serve as a form of resistance in our chaotic world? How can queer and specifically trans literature continue to serve as a form of resistance in our chaotic world? I'll leave it to you all, and then I want to bring us home and say one thing.
I would just say, like as we said before, to write about your experiences, and don't censor yourself for the sake of others. Just be, just be honest and raw in your self-expression, and it's gonna inspire others, and it's like to express themselves in the same way.
Let's go to Jennifer.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think when I hear the word resistance, I think about like political organization. And yeah, you can definitely be a writer and like a political organizer at the same time. But like,
yes,
for me, I'm just a writer. And so when I think about resistance, it's just like, I don't have to think about that. I just have to be. And the resistance is in the being.
The resistance is in the being. Emilia.
I can't follow up those two amazing comments. So I just wholeheartedly agree. I want to hear what you have to say.
Hold the haters to the fire. Use the art as a weapon of joyful inquiry and dissection. Because hate exists as an ossified blob of inexplicable nonsense that we can burn through with the power of literary imagination. Use the work as a spotlight which blindingly holds accountable the inexplicably dumbfounding bigotry that tries to hold us down. Hate lives in the dark. We bring the light and the fire. I believe wholeheartedly, with every fiber of my being, that the most dangerous and the most essential cultural worker in any society is the writer. They hold a mirror onto nature, which tells us who we are, who we were, and who we will be. And they also help us strategize who we can become if we open our minds, bodies, and spirits to meet the moment. That is our mission. That is our work. And that is our calling. And that, to me, is the civic responsibility that we owe for having this sight of being able to order society through narrative. If you are called to this life and you answer the call, because some people have this sight and they go on and do something else, and that's beautiful. But if you answer the call, and I suspect most people who are in here are or are reaching towards, platformed writing, then I believe that we owe a duty to the next generation to leave a record of light of who we were so that they know who they can become. And in doing that, we create a chain of generative, imaginative bliss that allows us to never be pigeonholed in any binary. And that, I believe, is our work. And with that, I know they've got to switch over because we were stuck in the limbo before. So I'm gonna let London do their thing. Thank you all so very, very much for a beautiful conversation. Thank you, London Evans, for being our tech guru. Thank you to Jennifer, Lonnie, Emilia for your insights and your brilliance. And thank you to Lambda for continuing to support the power and the potential and the community that is queer writing in this country and beyond. We are truly an essential part of the American fabric, especially now. And with that, fingers crossed for you all who are nominated, both in this room and elsewhere. Good luck and have a wonderful Saturday, everybody. Talk to y'all later. Thank you. Bye.